The small frontier town of Red River was the kind of place where reputations mattered more than truth. Dust blew through its crooked main street, horses stamped impatiently outside the saloon, and every soul in town kept one eye on the future and the other on the past. It was there that Mary Whitfield's fate seemed sealed long before she had a say in it. Mary, daughter of a once prosperous rancher, had grown into a woman of striking grace. Her father, burdened by debts and the slow death of his cattle business, had promised her hand to Judge Horace Claymore, a man as powerful as he was feared. The judge wasn't old by years, but his face was carved with severity, his eyes sharp as a hawk's, and his voice carried the weight of law, order, and merciless judgment. For most fathers, such a marriage would mean security for their daughters. But Mary, with her wild spirit and a heart that longed for freedom, felt the promise as a chain. The whole town whispered about it. Some said she'd be foolish to resist, others pitied her, though no one dared speak it too loudly where the judge might hear. Mary smiled in public, but in private she pressed her hands against her chest as if trying to keep her heart from breaking free. It was during the spring cattle drive that fate sent another man into her path. His name was Luke Carver, a cowboy whose boots were worn smooth from miles of trail and whose eyes carried a kind of loneliness no whiskey could drown. He was tall, rough around the edges, with a quietness about him that made folks underestimate him until they caught the steady strength in his gaze. He wasn't a man of money, nor did he hold any power in Red River. He worked for wages, slept under the stars more often than in a bed, and carried only what he could fit in his saddlebags. Luke met Mary by chance. He had come to town with his crew, driving a herd through, and stopped at the general store for supplies. Mary, sent on an errand by her father, stood by the counter when Luke walked in, dust clinging to his shoulders, hat tipped low. Their eyes met for only a heartbeat, but it was enough. Mary dropped her bundle of cloth, and Luke bent to pick it up. When he handed it to her, he didn't say a word, just offered it with a small, almost shy smile and a hand outstretched, calloused and honest. She took it, and in that simple touch, something passed between them. Over the next week, Mary found excuses to pass by the corrals where the trail hands camped. Luke, though cautious, always seemed to be waiting. They spoke little at first, about the weather, the cattle, the changing seasons. But words weren't always needed. Sometimes it was enough for Luke to tip his hat, for Mary to offer a smile, or for their hands to brush when she brought water for the men. But happiness never comes quietly in a town like Red River. Judge Claymore soon heard of their stolen moments. One evening, Mary's father stormed into the house, his face pale. "You'll stay away from that cowboy, Mary," he thundered. "Do you understand? The judge won't tolerate such foolishness. We owe him more than you can imagine. Without him, this ranch would be gone. And if you cross him, Lord help us, girl, he'll crush us all." Mary's lips trembled, but she didn't answer. Inside, though, she knew her father was right. The judge controlled land, cattle, even the sheriff himself. No one defied him without paying a heavy price. Still, Mary couldn't bury what had taken root in her heart. The breaking point came at the spring dance in the town hall. Lanterns lit the night, fiddles played, boots stomped on wooden floors, and laughter echoed through the streets. Judge Claymore, dressed in his best black suit, stood proudly at Mary's side, his hand gripping hers like ownership. He introduced her to townsfolk as his future bride, and Mary, though smiling faintly, felt suffocated with every breath. Luke was there too, leaning against the far wall, hat in hand, watching. He didn't belong in such finery, but he had come all the same, unable to stay away. Their eyes met across the room, and Mary's heart leapt. The judge noticed. His grip tightened. "Stay where you are," he warned her in a low voice. "That man is beneath you. If he comes near, I'll see him ruined, or worse." But the music swelled, couples spun, and Mary found herself swept onto the dance floor. She moved as if in a dream, until suddenly Luke was there, standing before her. He said nothing, only extended his hand, palm open, rough and steady. It was the simplest of gestures. No promises, no demands, no threats. Just an outstretched hand, waiting. Mary hesitated for only a moment before she placed her hand in his. The room went silent. The judge's face darkened with rage, his jaw clenching as the townsfolk froze, unsure whether to breathe. But Luke didn't falter. He guided Mary into the dance, moving with quiet confidence, each step carrying her farther from fear. For the first time in months, Mary laughed, soft and free, like a bird that had remembered its wings. The judge's fury was immediate. He stormed onto the floor, shoving Luke back. "You dare touch what's mine," he spat. "She was promised to me." Luke didn't raise his voice. He didn't draw his gun. He simply stood tall, eyes locked on the judge, and said, "She's not yours. She chooses for herself." The hall erupted in whispers. The judge's hand hovered near his holster, but the sheriff, wary of bloodshed, stepped between them. "Not here, Judge. Not tonight." But the judge's warning was clear. This isn't over. That night, Mary knew she had crossed a line she could never uncross. Her father raged, the judge threatened, and the whole town waited to see what punishment would fall on Luke Carver. Some said he'd ride out by morning to save his own skin. Others said the judge would have him jailed or worse. But Luke stayed. The next morning, Mary found him at the edge of town, saddling his horse. Her heart sank, thinking he was leaving. "You're going," she whispered. He shook his head. "Not unless you ask me to. But if you're staying here, with him, then I've no place." Tears filled her eyes. "Luke, I'm promised. If I defy him, he'll destroy everything my father has left." Luke looked at her then, really looked, and said softly, "Mary, all I've got to offer is this." He reached out his hand again, just as he had in the dance hall, open, steady, waiting. No land, no riches, just me. The world seemed to stop. Mary's breath caught. And in that moment she knew. Her father's debts, the judge's power, the town's whispers, they were all chains she would never escape if she stayed. She placed her hand in his. They rode out together that morning, before the judge could summon his men. Some said they were fools, chasing a dream built on nothing but hope and stubborn love. But others whispered that maybe, just maybe, the cowboy had beaten the judge. Not with a gun, not with wealth or power, but with something stronger, the courage to reach out his hand and wait for hers. And Mary, for the first time in her life, was free.